Hey new warriors, in this video we're going to go over 3 bad habits to avoid for beginners in Street Fighter 6. So if you are new to the game and you're tuning in, then be sure to listen up very carefully because this is for you. All that being said, if you want to see more on the channel education wise, then be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and let's get straight to it. Now, while there are plenty of bad habits that players oftentimes succumb to in Street Fighter 6, this one perhaps is the most impactful, and that is pushing way too many buttons. In a game where everything matters, your decision matters, your positioning matters, when you push too many buttons, it really creates a lot of scenarios where you're always at disadvantage. And by that I mean you're never really giving yourself a chance to really develop, really understand, really formulate a strategy around how to counter your enemy. Because if you're always pushing buttons without really understanding why the button is important and how the button can effectively be of great value to you, it oftentimes snowballs into a situation where now you're losing more than you should, you're getting frustrated, and then ultimately you feel like you're not improving. And so learning to avoid pressing too many buttons is one of the best solutions. And so how do you go about doing that? Well, for one, it's good to go into training mode and just test out every single button that your character has, understanding what the value of each button provides and how it can be of value to you in actual matches. So as a beginner, what you need to be doing is just practicing very simple and very straightforward type of practices. And by that I mean, look at the range at which your buttons can be pressed. Is your button a long range normal? Is it a short range normal? Think about the range between you and the enemy. If the enemy is too far away or if the enemy is too close, do you want to be always pushing buttons? Or perhaps you should block? These are questions you should be thinking about, or at least asking yourself in your mind. And so you need to always think about where you are in relation to your opponent. It's always a game of back and forth in Street Fighter 6, let alone any fighting game in that matter. And so learning to understand your range is really imperative, because that will help determine who becomes the winner in the game. And it'll help you to become a stronger player, since now you're not going to be susceptible to getting hit all the time and you having to mash buttons, let's say on wake up, which can really perhaps, again, prevent you from growing. So that's the first bad habit, and hopefully that one will sink into your mind and you can take the necessary steps to improve over time. When you start to recognize you're pressing too many buttons, one good way of knowing is you're just taking too much damage for free. That's the best, perhaps that's the best way of knowing you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. You're getting hit unnecessarily, and that needs to stop. So once you recognize that, then again, take the necessary steps to continue moving forward, build discipline, and you should be good to go. Now, this particular bad habit actually still happens amongst even the more advanced high-level players in Street Fighter 6. And so you shouldn't feel too bad about this one, but it is definitely a bad habit to address. And so jumping in too carelessly is a really big problem, because in Street Fighter, or again, any fighting game, it's all about space control. It's all about controlling the amount of space that you have in relation to the enemy, to therefore block off their approach and therefore give yourself the advantage every single time. So if you're in a situation where you feel scared because your opponent is walking you back to the corner, instead of trying to jump away or jump towards the enemy in hopes that you can maybe go for some free damage, but then ultimately you get hit by a dragon punch or you get hit by an anti-air, what you can do is instead back away, walk back, give up some space, but now think to yourself, what are some normal attacks? What are some of my poke options that I can utilize to maybe push the enemy away from me, to prevent them from gaining that space control that I'm trying to maintain? rather than trying to carelessly put yourself in a bad position out of, again, out of fear or perhaps out of not knowing what to do, just once again, go into training mode and just think of a scenario in your mind. I'm sure you've likely played enough games at this point to really think about what it is you're doing every single game, right? So you watch your gameplay, or you've at least for the most part thought of something in your mind like, okay, why am I getting hit so much? What's going on here? When those questions pop up into your mind, think of solutions as to how to prevent that from happening. So again, if you feel like you're too afraid of committing to something, and so you jump out of that fear, try to just have the discipline to stand where you are and just push the right buttons. Figure out what buttons are good for you in that range to keep the opponent out of your space, and then learn to walk forward. Learn to walk forward more. Learn to not just walk forward, but walk forward and block. Walk forward and block. It's all about inching your way in, and again, protecting that really valuable space that you have. And once you can do that, you will likely feel a lot more confident in your play, and you're less likely to want to commit to a jump in unless you're really sure that that jump in can net you a really nice juicy combo. You don't have to overcommit. So hopefully that gives you some insight. The final bad habit that all new players should definitely try to avoid is losing patience. Street Fighter is all about discipline. It's all about really waiting for your turn, because in the game of Street Fighter 6, it's all about that back and forth approach. It's all about the dance in the neutral. And so if you're always constantly trying to play the aggressor, always trying to press the button, jump in, and be too careless because you're just itching to get that one knockdown, that will oftentimes lead you to more problems than solutions, because you're always putting yourself in positions on the battlefield where you're always at disadvantage. And then that likely leads to your frustration, and then perhaps you even rage quitting or turning off the game, and perhaps even worse, who knows. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you need to address this very important issue of lack of patience. You need to really develop an iron discipline, because if you're always constantly trying to be the aggressor and not thinking about defensive ways to approach the game, you're going at the game too linearly, too one-dimensional. You need to always think of this game as two sides. You have offense and you have defense, and you have to really learn to balance those two effectively. And of course, that will come with time. As beginners, you're not too familiar with how the system works, and that's understandable. But this is why this video is here for you, to remind you that in order to become a better player, you need to exercise patience. And so it's all about, as I mentioned earlier, really thinking about what your character can do and cannot do against the enemy. And the best way to figure that out is, of course, to play more. But then once you continue to play and you start to notice patterns about certain things, go into training mode, because it's there for a reason. Go into training mode and look at the opponent's character, and say to yourself, okay, I kept getting hit with Ryu's crouching medium kick. I wonder why. Then you think to yourself, oh, well, I must have been in that range to get hit by it. Was I playing too impatiently? Was I just walking forward mindlessly without thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing? If that's the answer you have in your mind, then again, think of ways to slow down the game and play at your pace. This isn't about trying to, again, get that KO so you can get the W. You want your wins to feel meaningful, not meaningless. So the last tip, again, play patiently. No, don't rush. You don't have to rush the game to get better. Take your time, really approach the game from your pace, and if you have questions, there's always someone out there to answer them for you, myself included. So that being said, if you want to see more content like this, or if you have more questions that you want to ask me about Street Fighter 6, then be sure to leave some comments in the description, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. So hopefully these 3 bad habits you'll start to avoid, and you'll become a better player down the road. That being said, thank you so much for tuning in, New Warriors. I'll see you next time. Peace.